Welcome to the fastest daf in town, Tanil Masechtas Sanhedrin Daf Mem Ches. We are going to begin on Mem Ches Mud Aleph by the two dots about 5 lines from the top. So we were discussing in yesterday's daf Ha'arig Begel mace, someone who weaved a garment for a mace, and this is Tachrichim shrouds. However, they were never actually put on the mace. So this is a question of whether Hazmana Milsa, whether designated for a particular act, that in itself means something to make it asubahana, or is it only once it's actually used? And the question is, do we learn out from Egla Arufa that we're going out that when it comes to Egla Arufa, that even designating it is usur, so to other things? Or do we maybe compare it to Avodas Kachavim, and when it comes to Avodas Kachavim, it's only when it was actually used, and Hazman is not la milsa when it comes to Avodas Kachavim. So that was the question of how we should compare it one to the other. Simin kipa nafshe dechatzve, which means hewn rocks, kenise, slaughtering, de umne, profession. Meisve kipa shehu tame medres. So the first one is a kippah, a kerchief, in which is large enough to be matame tumas medres. So says Rashi, Chiafu royal medres pa'amim shemikalfal tovio shevasalav. If let's say you can sit on it, so therefore it's considered to be tame medres, and that's a kippah. And then v'nosnu l'sefer. You ended up using it as some form of a cover of a Sefer Torah. Tahar min hamedras. So then it's tahar for medras, says Rashi. Bloshum tvila. Debotole shem medras. It's considered not to be shaykh to medras. You're not going to sit on it. As when it comes to tumas medras, if we say Amoid, stand up and let us do work with it, so therefore it's not used for the utility of sitting. It's not matama adam or kalim, avol shem keli olav shav metafachas asfarim metamis tumas bamaga. So now it's shaykh because it's connected to a sefer Torah. It's shaykh tumas mag of touching. V'zeh hari naga ba'atzma ba'oid medris. If while you were tumas medris you touched it. There's still a kli, the initial of tumas maga. It still has the tumah of maga. Sharihu royla, and the point is uminitani tahar min medris. The fact that it says it's tahar for medris, bahazmana ba'alma, by just designating it alma hazmana milsahi. The fact that you didn't even do it yet, but the fact is you're planning on doing this, that's enough because hazmana is milsa. So it's going to be a raya that even having the proper thought process is enough. So let's continue. Tahar min medris of tame maga medris. Okay, or it says on the side maga tame mace. Okay, so ema nosnu vikar kachtoi. No, it's only when you taka do a maisa that you actually used it. However, if you just thought about it, not. So lamuli nasnu vikar kachtoi. Why does it have to be both? Either one should be enough because either one's an action. If you have this kerchief that's you designated, it the lameitzar tefillin, to use it for tefillin, but sarbe tefillin, you wrapped it up with tefillin. Aser lameitzar be pshiti. You can't use it for coins anymore. Azmene, if you designated this kerchief for tefillin, v'loit sarbe, but you didn't actually use it, or tsarbe you did, but azmene, but you didn't designate it, shalom sarbe pshiti. So we see that you actually need to do both. You actually need to have the intention to use it for this purpose and actually do a maisa. Well, Abaye Yom Hazmana Milsi, but according to Abaye, who says Hazmana is enough, so then Azmane Afagav the Sarbe, if you had designation, even if you didn't wrap it up yet, it'll be Asr. Sarbe, if you used it, Azmane in, Eloy Azmane low. It's all Tali and Hazmana. So even if you used it, if you didn't have the intention, then it's not. Okay. Tashma. So again, we're using this mnemonic. Now we're up to nafshe. So nefesh is referring for a building for the sake of a mace. As Rashi binyan shal hakever shibanu l'sham chai l'kishiyamos yikvar boy, that this is where a person will be buried. Shibanu l'shem chai muter bahana. It was actually built for the sake of someone who is alive. That's muter bahana. Haisiv boy dimos. If you added to this building of some sorts, dimos echad l'shem mace aser bahana. So what do we see? We see hazmana milsahi. Even though your intention, all you did was have the intention of using it for a mace, even though it was not yet used for a mace, it's aser bahana, which sounds very similar to what we said before when it comes to ha'oyreg begel mace. So apparently, then itself, again, is a machlokas, but it's the same thing. So hachma meskinan derama be mace. So talking about, Imamish already put a mace in there. And that's the reason why it's usher, because you did a maisa. So yachi ma'area hoisif. What do you mean you added a brick? Who cares? Kil hoisif nami. What's the difference if you added a brick? You're putting a mace there. Well, tzricha afga depanya. Even though you remove the mace later on, so in that situation, you would think maybe the mace is no longer there. So therefore, that action, the original action, didn't do anything. And therefore, taka, that's the case. Therefore, you need the brick, the actual and extra binyan. If you recognize this Rashi this extra row that was added, if you recognize it, you can take away that row, and then all of a sudden it'll be mutter bahana because you're no longer using it for a mace. Tashma, and then we continue in the mnemonic of hachaitziv, which is talking about hewn rocks. Hachaitziv kever aviv, a person is producing with hewn rocks a kever for your father. V'holach v'kaver b'kever acher, you're burying him somewhere else. Harizel yikvar bo oylamis, you can not use it anymore. Says Rashi, yesh lochush. So alma hazmana milsehi, the fact that you used it with the intention of for a mace, even though you ended up not using it for a mace, that's still hazmana. No hasmishim kavod aviv. It's only because of kavod aviv. Says Rashi, yesh lochush. It's not really an Isser Hana. If it was for someone else, not. Because why does it use the language of your father? It shouldn't make any difference who it is if you hold Hazmana Milsa. The reason why we use your father's language is because it's dafked by the father, because covered of it. Someone who does the hewing of stones for your father, so you can't use those stones. It makes sense. If the whole issue is because of hazmana, if we're talking about like the actual strings themselves of the garment, even Abaya doesn't say it except for the actual garment that was already woven, because that's chazil mace. But if you have, let's say, strings that you will use to make a garment, you have intention, this string I'm going to make tachrichim with, that's nothing. It's actually when you actually make the garment and it's here and it's fit to be used for a mace, that is where the machlokas is. So over here, the fact that you just used a bunch of rocks, obviously it shouldn't be an issue. It's not a hazman issue. So then what's the problem? It's because of kavod aviv. Tashma, kever chadash. If you have a new grave, muter b'hana, it's muter b'hana. Hitulbo, nefel, aser b'hana. So it says Rashi, hashta kal sagad afil zimanu a mace. Even if you designate for a mace, it's still considered to be muter b'hana. But once you used it for a mace, then not. Now, hitul in, lo hitul lo, which is mashma hazmana, is lav milsahi. It's pretty clear. Now, hu adin the afgad lo hitul. The truth is, even if you didn't put the nafel there, just as long as you had the intention to put the base there, because hazmana is milsa. That the reason why we come on, that there's a shita that because we're talking about a nafel, that it doesn't have the din of the tfisa of the kever, that we say that when it comes to a mace, they're kinda certain area around it. And maybe that doesn't apply when it comes to a navel. Tashma. Meiser hamesim lamesim. The extra monies designated for a mace has to be now used lamesim. Meiser hames liyarshav. Says Rashi. Meiser hames gavul shem mace pliny. A person designated money because there was a person who needed to be buried, and there's extra money, so we say it's needed to be given for mason. However, Meiser hames liyorshim, says Rashi, lihanois mehen alma hazman la milsahi. If let's say there was extra money, so it could be given to the yorshim. How could it be used for yorshim? It was supposed to be used for a mace. Must be because hazman is la milsa. The hakamai skinan shigavu machayim. It was collected while the guy was alive, and therefore was not for a mace. Halotani Haka doesn't say that not Meiser Hamesim Lamesim, the leftover monies go to a mace. Meiser Hames Yarshav. The extra money for a specific mace goes to its inheritors. Vitani La Ketzad Gavu Lamesim Stam Zel Meiser Hamesim. What does it mean? If you collected for mason in general, a bunch of dead people, people who are dying, so that's Meiser Hamesim. Lamesim, that's Lamesim. Havu Lames, Gavu Lames. Gavu Lames Zeh, if you're collecting for a particular mace, Zel Meiser Hames Liyarshav. So we see, we're not talking about a case where he's alive, he's dead. So that's not an answer. He says, you shouldn't touch this money at all until Eliyahu Navi comes. Now, Rav Nassan Oimer Yasenu Dimus Al Kivroi, that you should build an extra row by the grave. O Ziluf Lefnei Tasso, you should do some type of sprinkling of wine or something in front of the casket or the mace. Ella Abai, so Abai Matarza Taime, Ro Matarza Taime. Abai Matarza Taime, Dukuliyama Hazmana Milsahi. Really, Hazman alone is something. Tanakama Sarva Chazile Tofis. Doi Chazile Lo Tofis. The only thing that's typhus is things that it's fit for it. Doi Chazile, says Rashi, Sheinot Sarech L'Haitzi Boy, the Hainu Meiser, all the extra money is not toughus. The Isser Hana of even by Hazmana is dafk in a situation where it's something that could be used. But in any which is Meiser, that is not considered to be under the umbrella of Hazmana, and therefore it's not. It can go to the Yarship. That's according to one shita. The toughest loy chazi lo toughest. Rameir Masavkele, he doesn't know he doesn't know what the status of this money is, and that's why he says that statement. Rav Nosim Shitule Davadi Toughest. That certainly it is. Hilkach Yasa Dimus, therefore, in itself is Osir. This extra money is Osir. Therefore, Hilkach Yasa Dimus Al Kivro. Therefore, you should do something with that extra money relating to this particular mace. He holds Hazman is nothing. So Tanakam Savar Ki Bozule Achul Zelusi Gabi Yorshin. So let's look at Rashi. Tanakamas holds Mechayim Achle Leziluse. So it's embarrassing collecting for his burial. V'nichale, therefore it's good. She's Basil Achamisasai. Lihanois Yarshin. It's better that the Yarshin should acquire it because he doesn't want this. It's an embarrassment that people are collecting for him, etc. So therefore, it should go to the Yarshim. He's not sure. Rav Nasan pshitule deloy machol. He's not moichel. And therefore, you should do something with this money. Okay, let's look at question 14. Meiser Hames, Rameir Oimer Liga Bohen, Achiavel Yahu. Mahu Svekas Rameir Bedinze, Lobail Rabba. So according to Abaya, what's the subbing? Mitzad Echad Hazmana Milsa. Really, Hazmana does do something. Oh, therefore, all this money should be usher. Odilma shemalu nitvas mashin sarach utzarchai v'hainu meiser, but maybe it's not nitvas, that which we don't need, the extra money, and therefore it's not usher hana. L'rava mitzad echad hazman ala milsa. The truth is, it's nothing. And he says umachil l'zilusa gam yarshim. He's Michael, and he wants the yarshim to get this money, basically. Odilma meitayich shenizbaza hameis kishigavu hamois bishmo. But since it was embarrassing that this money was collected in his name, lo machil l'zilusa lihanus yarshim, and therefore he's not going to be Michael, and therefore he's not going to have the yarshim inherited. Something along those lines. Tashma, ha'ava v'imo mizarkin by kalim. So let's say you have a father or mother that's literally throwing kalim. Rashi says zarkin big deihen olav, like garments. Yosmin atzarch, more than necessary, memnechi basai, because of the love that they have for this mace. Umachmat sarin mischavanin, they're such anguish. They're basically ostering everything that they have. There's such devastation. So what do we do? So mitzvah al-cherem latzilon. It's a mitzvah on others to save. So what does that mean? Dein hashavas aveda gadol mizeh. There's no greater level of hashavas aveda to try to take this away, to have them stop doing this. Alma, says Rashi, hazman ala milsahi. Di milsahi leika hatzala. What do you mean they should save these garments, right? And then give it back to them or something, or sell them and then give them money. What do you mean? If hazman a milsa, the fact that they threw all these expensive garments and kalim into the ground, let's say, before the burial, why should people be allowed to retrieve it and save it? How is that acceptable? It must be milsa, that's hazman is la milsa. Mem chesed beis. No hasim ishum maraihu. It's only because of their bitterness, says Rashi. Mitech saron hein oisin kain ve'ein zu hazmana. There's no hazmana over here. They're just in tremendous anguish, and that's the reason why they're doing what they're doing. It's not because they actually want these items to be thrown in away or to make them asur b'hana. No. Okay, fine. Let's keep going. So Yihachi had a tiny law. If that's the case, now which we learned upon this, I just want to get my question sheets prepared. Okay. As long as they didn't touch the actual coffin of a nagum b'mita, if it hit the casket, asurin, then already at that point it's asur. So what's the difference? So if it's because of bitterness, why would we say that it's totally on the negias hamita? So b'mita hanikveres imoy. It's the mita which will be buried with him. The mechalfe betachrichi hames, that were together with the tachrichim. Says Rashi, that they would bury it with him. The fact that it touched it already becomes asur. The fact that it's already on this thing that's going to be buried with him, once it touches, people are going to think, well, if you can take that, that's mutar b'hana. Probably tachrichin are also mutar b'hana, which we know they're not. Okay. Toshma. Kish yasol haniach bo tefillin. Let's say you have this purse in which tefillin are put into. So asur haniach bo mois. So you're not allowed to put money into it because apparently hazman a milsa. Haniach bo tefillin. If you put tefillin in it, yaniach bo mois. You can still put money into it. So l'chayra we see beferish hazman a milsa. So aim also the hiniach bo tefillin also haniach bo mois. No, it's only when you did both. As we saw before. Tashma. Oimru uman. If you say to a craftsman, Asile tik shel sefer, make this kli for a sefer, o nartik shel tefillin, or case for tefillin, so adshlo nishtamish behen kodesh mutter lishtamish behen chayil. If you didn't actually use it for tefillin or sefer Torah, you can still use it. Nishtamish behen kodesh aslo nishtamish behen chayil. So again, l'chayr, this is a beferish Raya that Hazman is La Milsa, because it's all totally on use. No Tanaihi. It's actually, this whole thing is a Machlokes. Tanaim Desanya. Sipun Zahav. Let's say a person covered tefillin with gold, which obviously makes it possible. Oh, Shatola Alehet or Shel Behemoth Meir, used a non-kosher hide. Psulais. So then obviously those tefillin are apostle. It's halach Moshe Sinai that they're apostle. However, or Behemoth Tahara Ksheris. You have to use kosher tefillin is only if it's used with a kosher hide. Afagav, and Rashi quotes, because the pasuk is Laman Tia Torah Hashem Baficha. That's to be something which is mutar baficha, something you could eat, okay, which is kosher food. Afagav Shaloi Ibdan Lishman. Even if you didn't actually tan it for the sake, says Rashi, or Zel Lishmo, Dazman Al Milsahi. We don't care about what your intention were. Lo Ivchas Lan Ba, says Rashi. No, even kosher hides could become puzzle. You actually had to have the right intention. So what do you mean intention? Hazmana. Is there a situation where the dead body is still sitting there and we're busy weaving garments for a mace? Says Rashi, Shemes mutuba bibazayin kazeh. What a bizayin is just sitting there. Lashiaisai. That you're waiting until you start weaving it, and then all of a sudden you have this whole question: is hazman a milsa or not? By your weaving it, what exactly is going on over here? So yes, it does happen. Going shichve deharpanya, says Rashi. Aniyam hayu. These poor people, after people already died, they collect monies. That's when they actually make the garments. You're saying, is this possible? Yeah, it happens. Darsh Maramor, Hilchas Akavasi de Abaya, the Rabbanan Hilchas Akavasi de Rabba, Hilchas Akavasi de Rava. Right? Because otherwise, Halachas the Abaya, the Al Kigam, and this is not one of them. So the Halacha Tak is like the sheet of Rava that we established. The Rava says that Hazmana, that Oirig Beglames is mutter, because Rav is of the opinion that that Hazmana is Lav Milsahi. Okay. So that is the Shita of Rava, Hazmana, Lav Milsahi. Hazmana, let me just write this down, even though I can easily just should remember it, right? Okay. Tanaban. Harugi Malchus. Actually, before I do that, let's look quickly at question TB 28, which I should have done before, which is what we saw before. Let's see if I answer this question properly. TB 28. Meiser Meiser Meir Wemel Yigam Hen Achiv Eliyahu Ma suffix or Im Hazmana Milsa. O Im HaMeiser Gam B'Shvil HaMeis. O Im Meichlin as a Meiser. Okay. It's not completely wrong, but it's not clean. But that's fair enough. Okay. Let's keep on going. Okay, so again, the halacha is like the shita of Rava, that Hazmana is Lav Milsahi. Tanaban. Harugi Malchus. So you have someone that's to be killed by the actual king. Nichnesehen lamelech. Their assets go to the king. Harugi based in Nechsem Yarshin. However, if you're killed by the one that Arba Misa is based in, your Yarshim inherit. Mihudo Emer Af Harugi Malchus Nechsem Yarshin. No, even if the king kills you, your children will inherit you. It doesn't go to the king. Nechsem Yarshin. So Amalei Rabbi Yehuda. So he said to Rabbi Yehuda, who says that by Harugi Malchus it goes to the Yarshim. Look for Namor. The pasuk in Malachim Aleph says, Hini Bekerim Navois. Asher Yard Sham Lisharto. So it says that there was a Yerusha of the king regarding Navois. Navois was executed by the king Achav, who was no tzaddik, of course, and Achav inherited the vineyard that belonged to Navois. It wasn't given over to his children or his Yarshim. It was given to Navois. Armalahen ben Achia Aviv Haya. Actually, Veroi Lu Yarshim Haya. That this was actually a cousin. This was his father's brother's son. So actually, Achav and Navois were related, and that's the reason why he got it. Apparently, he was the next of kin. Avu Harbi Bonim Hayu. What do you mean? He had a bunch of kids. Okay, fine. He was a distant relative, but he wasn't his kids. His kids should have gotten it. So how do we understand that? And Rashi over here says, we don't know anywhere in the psukim that shows that Navos had children, okay? But assuming that's the truth, not only was Navos killed, but all of his kids. And it mentions Demei Banov, his children, were Isi. So therefore, basically, all of his Yorsh, conveniently, all of his relatives, except for the king, died. This is referring to children that were potential to come from him. That it goes to the king. That's the reason why over there it says, in the same parak, Barech Navois Elokim. Now, this is actually like a euphemism, because it's really cursed. Navos was cursed. Umelech Allah. Umelech. And the king. Now, what do we see from here? It says, V'melech. Ho'idihu shemorid b'malchus, that he was rebelled against the king. Kadesh yischai misel malchus v'nechos v'melech. Everything goes to the king. Why does it say, and not only was he cursed by God, but also by the king? So he was morid b'malchus, and he deserved to be killed. And because of, that's what it says, and therefore also the possessions were taken from him. Why does it mention Hashem? Only to mention his anger. To increase anger. It was also mentioned only to increase anger, says Rashi. Like, what's the difference if he's deserved penalty because of God? He deserves it because of Malchus. So it's the Dayanim Olav, those who judge, that no one should spread rumors against Achav, that actually Navos didn't deserve to be killed. He was actually someone who did deserve, not just because of the way he was with regard to the king, but also toward God. That it goes to the king. That's why also it says there, V'yanos Yoyav el oil Hashem, that Yoyav ran to the oil, to the Mizbeach, and he held on to the Kronos HaMizbeach, to the corners. So basically, here Shlomo was sentencing Yoyav to death, and Yoyav held onto the corners of the Mizbeach. The Ksiv Yomer Loed say, I'm not going to go. Kipoi, almost, I'm going to die here. El Madiyam next to Yarshin, that it goes to the Yarshin. My nafkamina. What's the nafkamina? So look in Rashi. Says Rashi, Kipo almost. But Yoyav Ksiv Lo Yeh Nidoin L'Malchus Kadesh Lihe Nixi L'Melech. So why exactly did he say I'm going to die here? So as though to say that I'm not going to be killed by the king, but rather I'm going to just die here, and therefore my children will be able to inherit everything. So it must be, because if Shlomo killed him, then we would see that it would go to the king. That's a raya, because otherwise, what's the difference? The answer is l'chai shah. Very poshut answer. Dechiyu ba'alma, says Rashi, he was pushing him off. He was buying time. He wasn't saying, about his possessions. He wanted to stay there so he didn't get killed. V'yoshev ben Yahu es hamelech davar, so he returned this matter saying, Koi diber Yoav, this is what Yoav said, V'chol hananis, he answers, so Amalei zil, Amalei tarti, go tell Shlomo two things. Lo tavid b'hai gavra, I katlis le Kibul litulte delatia avucha. Let's look in Rashi really quick. Mashma dov diber v'anya harbe v'kar kipoi almost m'dahir v'ksiv v'suloi ela hachikar m'lei tarti lotavid be. Okay. Lotavid b'hai gavra, don't do this. Ikatla slave, you kill me. Kibul letuse delati, you're going to be makabel a curse. Avuchi, your father will be makabel a curse. V'lo shavke, if you don't leave me, deleko balatahi delataya, then let me live with a curse. Avuch. The Yomi hamelch asi kasher diber, will do as you said. Upagaboy of kivratoi, he encountered him and he buried him. Oim Rabbi Yehuda Marav kol klolo shekilo David es Yoav, every curse that David cursed Yoav niskayim b'zar shel David, so it was miskayim in the children of David. This curse on Yoav ended up befalling David's children. Al tichus mebeis Yoav zav u'matzaira, that it should not be from the house of Yoav, it should not be cut off from the house of Yoav, zav u'matzaira, u'maksik bepelech, v'noifel b'cherev, v'chaser lechem zav. So what do we see? Merachavam, when it comes from Merachavam, which was a descendant of David, he was a descendant of David. Also, he was in the days battling against Yeravam and Avat. The king Rechavam, his amitz l'alois, delayed from coming from Merkava on his chariot, l'onus Yerushalayim, to flee to Yerushalayim. The ksiv v'chol Merkav asher yirkav alav hazav yitma. They mentioned there's a zav, Mitzaira, Oziyahu. We find that regarding Oziyahu. His heart was high until he was destroyed. He rebelled. To bring spices to the mizbeach. That there was saras on his head. Fine. So we see that in the time of Uziyahu, that he was given saras. But Pelech, which Rashi says, oiches makal, he was holding like a stick, holding onto a cane. Ma'asa, well, not from Asa. T'chsiv, rakl esik naso choles raglav, he was weak, and he needed a stick. Rabbi Yehuda Marav, she'achsu poid gara, that he actually was grabbed hold of gout. Armalei Marzutra buried Rav Nachman Hechidami. What exactly is this situation? Armalei Kemech, what is it like? Kemeched b'basar chai. The gout is so painful, it's comparable like sticking needles in live flesh. How do you know this? So he actually suffered from gout. Chayish Bey. He learned it from his teacher. That Hashem teaches the secrets to the righteous. And they fell by the sword. So we see that in the time with Yoshiyahu, the falling of the sword. Kikavra, that his entire body was pierced like a sieve. V'chaser lachem michanya t'chsiv v'archaisa aruchas tamid nasnulo. Rabbi Yehuda Marav hainu damri inchi. This is referring to a lack of food. As we continue to Mem Testament Aleph, tehei loita v'lo tehei la'ata. They should be loita and not lata, not those who curse others. Says Rashi, Noachacha v'yoismin hamekalolim, better to be among those who are cursed, v'lumin hamekalim, not those who curse others. Lafisha saif kalolos chinam loshuv el hamekalel. Since David cursed Bechinam, it went back to the descendants of David. Okay, let's see if there's a question here. Question TA 28. Kol makom sheshonu chachamim derech minyan in mukdam u'muchar. I don't think we did that. Okay, definitely did not. And TB 29. The Heshav Hashem is Damo al Roisho Asher Paga B'Shnei Anashim Sadikim V'Toivim B'Menu. We definitely did not do that. Adka.